Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Ending more than 4 decades of progressive conservative domination of Alberta, amounting to 12 consecutive majority governments, and after 43 years in power in the Canadian oil province of Alberta, the new Democratic Party swept into power with a clear majority, electing Rachel Notley as the Premier. The NDP secured 53 of the 87 ridings, and here is Rachel Notley at her victory speech.
Friends, I believe that change has finally come to Alberta.
With us to help unpack this election and what it means to Albertans and Canadians is Gordon Laxer. He's founding director and former head of Parkland Institute at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Thank you so much for joining us, Gordon.
Very nice to be here.
So, Gordon, with this substantial majority, and as the NDP has elected 53 of the 87 ridings, give us a sense of what were some of the issues that swung the vote left?
Well, people were finally getting tired of the Progressive Conservative Party that, as I say, have run this province for 43 years. They were showing a real sense of entitlement, that they kind of owned the province and just took it for granted, and there was a lot of cronyism going on about really this election happened in 2 stages. 3 years ago, there was a provincial election, and a new party, the Wild Rose Party, rose and took half the Conservative base. It was a kind of Tea Party-like party that didn't like the mainstream Progressive Conservative Party. It was a bit like the Tea Party versus the more establishment Republican Party. And so they siphoned off half the vote. And the Progressive Conservatives in the last election only won when people in the center and even the center left moved over to the Conservatives because they were so scared about Wild Rose getting elected. And then as soon as the Conservatives got elected, they brought in the Wild Rose Party light. So they brought in austerity, and the people who had voted, the progressive people who had swung over to the Conservatives, were miffed at that. So the Conservatives lost votes to the right with the Wild Rose, and then the left progressive parties, people all coalesced behind the NDP. And that hadn't happened before because there are several parties in the center and the left. The Liberal Party, the New Democrats, the Alberta Party, but everything coalesced around Rachel Notley and the New Democrats. So with 40% of the vote and the right-wing vote split, they were able to win. And 80% of people said they wanted to change the government, that were really tired of the Conservatives. And there was also a vote against austerity, there was a vote for the environment, for recognition of First Nations people, of the need for healthcare spending and education and school lunches for kids and that kind of thing.
Now, this is a party the Progressive Conservative Party in a province that is the oil-producing province. A large portion of the Canadian gross national product is dependent on this province. Now, they've lost. Now, what does this mean in terms of the NDP's party platform and what they were talking about in terms of the oil sands and in terms of the oil industry? The world's gaze is on Canada right now because of this election, mainly due to the implications on oil production. How is all this going to play out in Alberta with the NDP?
Well, Alberta produces about 80% of the oil in Canada, and it's especially in the tar sands, the oil sands, that where production is increasing, and that's where the exports are coming from, also natural gas, and Alberta is the energy province. And Alberta, in many ways, in the oil industry, has been running Canada. The Harper government is based in Alberta. Harper himself is from Calgary. in Alberta, and they elected in the last election all but one member from Alberta. So this is really an earthquake in Canadian politics. What this is going to mean for I just call them the sands, neither the tar sands nor the oil sands. The New Democrats are treading quite carefully on that. I mean, they have much more progressive policy on issues such as raising corporate taxes, having a royalty review, raising taxes on the high-income people, and putting money into education and healthcare. They're much more cautious on oil policy. So the province takes a really pathetic level of royalties. It's nothing like Norway does. And Rachel Notley has called for a review of that, which gives her, so there will be a committee or a commission will study that, and then her government will have a chance to then decide on, she didn't say she would raise royalties, but it gives a hint of that. And she wants to make it much more environmental. She mentioned that Alberta has a black eye in the world in terms of the environment. But I don't see the New Democrat government phasing out the sands like I think should happen, because I don't think the sands can be greened. But now the Premier-elect Rachel Notley has said she will not go to Washington to push for the Keystone XL pipeline, that is something that is an internal American decision, and so she won't push on that. There's also talk about pipeline going to the west coast in British Columbia, and she thinks that is the Gateway, Northern Gateway pipeline, that is not going to happen because there's so much opposition to it, and she's not going to push on that. But she's open to other pipelines. So they're treading quite cautiously on the oil issue.
And lastly, Gordon, let's talk about what this means in terms of the upcoming elections in Canada, in terms of the federal elections, and what impact this will have on the Conservatives and the Harper government.
Well, because this has been the bastion of the Conservative Party in the federally, so of Mr. Harper, this is a real blow to the Progressive Conservatives. No one thought that in their base they could lose it. So it's going to give a real boost to the federal New Democrats, whose strongest base now is in Quebec. I see this, this is a victory for the 99%. It isn't often that the 99% come out and actually defeat the 1% and that big oil get defeated. And that really boosts people's morale. Young voters came out, and I think that they were going to come out in larger numbers because they see that change can happen. And that can only help the federal New Democrats gain in popularity.
So, Gordon, I understand Rachel was one of your students. Tell us more about how she was as a student.
Well, I met her in 1986 when she was 22 years old. She was in a class of mine, and very impressive at that point. And I've maintained contact with her since. She is just a natural-born leader, and I am so proud of her. I worked with her dad, even a few years before that, who was the sole member of the New Democrats in the legislature out of 80 members. And he was very impressive and earned great respect. And his daughter is doing as well, or even better. So I have a strong personal connection with Rachel and with her father.
Gordon, we'll be back to you very soon to see how all of this is going to play out once the NDP takes power. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to talk to you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.